Well, welcome everybody from me as well. David Somerville asked me to say something about the Highland Good Food Conference, which we ran earlier this year, in the hope, as you'll have gathered, I think, that some of our experience may resonate with other groups and maybe prompt some thoughts as to how it might work for you as well, or something similar might work for you as well. So I don't really want to talk too much about the detail of the conference because I want to leave as much time as possible for your questions. But if you do want more detail, there's lots of information on the Highland Good Food Partnership website, and I'll pop a link to that into the chat later on. Instead, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the conference itself and how that worked, and an update on developments that have taken place since the conference. And then I'm going to highlight a few of what I think are the key features that contributed to its success. So first of all, the quick overview. So the conference was held on Zoom over 5 Monday afternoons in January and February this year. And we had about 90 delegates to each session, which included people from all parts of the food system. So producers and growers, obviously, but also retailers, funders, people from Highlands and Islands Enterprise, for instance, people from Highland Council. We had educationalists from the Scottish Rural College and from UHI. So people from all parts of and community growers, of course, and people from the more socially sort of oriented food banks and that sort of side of things. So people from the whole food system. And each of the 5 sessions included 5 short provocations, which is a word that seems to have got around quite a lot these days, but they're basically focused talks, each about 5 minutes long, designed really to make delegates think about things in a slightly different way. And pretty much all of the rest of the time was devoted to group discussions. The main aim of those was to develop a series of proposals for action to improve the food system in the Highlands. And the way we did that was that quite early on, we offered delegates a choice of about 15 or so themed project groups. And we picked the 11 most popular of those. And at the outset, we thought there might be maybe 2 or 3 of those, which once they'd actually been talked through over the rest of the conference, ended up with practical projects that the groups could take forward. But actually, we ended up with all but one had something that was worthwhile that the delegates thought they could take forward and do something with. So that was very exciting for us, certainly. And what was very clear, really from the outset, was that there was a huge appetite to improve the food system, and specifically in our terms, really, to make it better for the environment, but also better for the people actually eating the food and for the people working in the sector. And there was a recognition that we can achieve much more by collaborating than we can do by continuing and just working in a kind of blinkered way in our normal silos. So that's the conference. Now, since the conference, there has been a fair amount of progress. We've got I'll just give you a few examples of it, but we've have a very high-powered group, which has been looking at quite a high-tech greenhouse growing approach. And they've recently applied for funding for a research project to develop that. They're looking at potentially setting up 1 or more large greenhouses of sort of a hectare or possibly more than that, and then a network of smaller ones in rural locations. And the idea there is to give access to locally and sustainably grown Mediterranean veg. We have a circular economy group, which is working with Zero Waste Scotland and the Highland Council to work at community scale to reduce food waste and bring its processing back into communities. So that can produce compost. One of the problems we got in the Highlands is obviously because we've got a very low population density, then food waste collection only happens in Inverness. So virtually all of it goes to landfill at the moment. We're also working with a professor of food policy at Scotland's Rural College, SRUC, to take some of our stories from Highland growers and producers and the things that they're doing to make things better, kind of in spite of the system really, but to use their stories to influence policy at national and local level. We've also produced a map of the Highland food system, which has got layers of showing food producers, community growing food initiatives, food banks, community fridges and larders, lots of different sort of aspects of the food system. And the idea from that really is that a number of the project groups identified the need to just identify lots of other different groups doing similar things in different locations and try and work out who had the best ideas and really raise everyone up to the same sort of level. So that was the reason for doing the map. We've also just been accepted both as a sustainable food places initiative and as a regional food group. And the interesting thing there is that the Sustainable Food Places initiatives look at things very much from a social and environmental sort of perspective. And the regional food groups tend to look at things much more from an economic development point of view. So we're very excited that we, I think, are the first group that's been accepted to do both in conjunction with each other. And also today was the closing date for applications for our very first member of staff. So all in all, you can see there's quite a lot going on, and it's only really 5 months since the conference finished. Very little of that has really been my doing. So I think I can say without false modesty that it does feel as if there's a phenomenal amount going on. And I think probably catalyzed by the conference. So what did actually make the conference a success? Well, I've got 4 suggestions. The first one is that we had a very, very long gestation period, not really by choice. So we started talking about the whole thing about almost 2 years before the first conference session. And during that time, we made our plans, we picked people's brains, stole their ideas, tore up the plans and started again. And at times that was a bit frustrating, but each time we started again, it seemed like we ended up with something better. And it gave us time to build up a really good network of relevant contacts and bring in support from the likes of WWF, James Hutton Institute, the NFUS, Scottish Crofting Federation, et cetera, et cetera. So that was not intentional, but it was really useful to take quite a long time thinking things through and working things out. The second thing was that we were very determined from the outset that this wasn't going to be just another talking shop. We really wanted things to change. We were pretty sure that we wouldn't get very far by getting together and saying, oh, well, politicians need to sort things out. So even though the policy playing field is by no means level, we thought we needed delegates to get out there and do the things themselves that they actually can do. And interesting, what we seem to have found, although it's very early days yet, but what we seem to have found is that that approach seems to make the local politicians sit up and take notice a bit. And it's made me think that maybe we're more likely to engage with local authorities if we can demonstrate how we can help them to solve their own problems, but on our terms, which is a bit of a sort of light bulb moment for me. So the third thing, which I think was relevant, was that we were quite ambitious. We started off with a £16,000 budget, which, looking back, was incredibly low, really, for what we wanted to do. But at the same time, it's a lot of money for local community groups. The reason we picked 16 grand was really because we thought it was about the most we could get our funders to agree to. And we did subsequently top it up a little bit to almost 20,000. But also that ambition spread through to the people that we engaged with. And we brought in people, for instance, to our steering group. It included a local farmer, but also the chair of Scotland Food and Drink and Island Council's head of climate change and energy. And similarly, we realized that just actually launching a conference and hoping people would turn up wasn't really going to do the trick. So we ran a communications campaign for 5 months leading up to the conference, including blog posts, podcasts, and social media posts, and all really designed to raise the level of conversation before we even got into the conference. And the fourth thing was that we were partly lucky, but also I think we thought through the timing of the conference, and we'd recognized that farmers are seeing that they have a big part to play in dealing with climate change and the loss of wildlife. And I think for the first time in my life, farmers are engaging really constructively with environmentalists. Also looking around, some of the big charitable funders like the Esme Fairbairn Foundation are putting very large amounts of money into the agro-environmental arena. And at the same time, I don't know what it's like in other parts of Scotland, but certainly in the Highlands, there's been a recent influx of younger and more idealistic growers and producers. And we can see that with organizations like the Land Workers Alliance and the CSA network, which have seen really quite significant growths in their membership, albeit from quite low bases. And I think also we were lucky in that Brexit certainly has focused minds of farmers, because they want to know how the funding structure is going to work in the future, but also focused minds of everybody else as to where their food's coming from. And COVID similarly has sort of amplified that. So there you have it. That an exciting project, I think, that has generated action as it was designed to. And from my point of view, anyway, I think 4 key factors, which are the planning, the action focus, the ambition, and the timing. So I'll maybe hand over for questions.